Hello, geometry students. Welcome back to another video. We are continuing on with our lessons on translations and movement of shapes from one spot to the next spot, things like that. Before Thanksgiving break, we really did a lot on reflections, rotations. We introduced a little bit of translations, but we're really going to take some notes today, demonstrate how that's being performed, what does a translation mean, and then the rest of this week we're going to be looking at something called compositions, which is more than one of these happening at the same time. How do we look at things that might be doing two or three of them at once? And so today we're really, though, catching up on translations. To help us, though, here's some important, what I would say, some rather important notes, if you would, where these notes help you to define what is it that you need for each of these things to happen. Like, what are you looking for is another way of saying it. So reflections. Remember, for a reflection, we're looking for a specific line, right? That line that shows it's flipping over. The pre-image is flipping over it to obtain that second image. And so that's really all we need, is that line of reflection. For rotations, we need two things. Remember that rotations, it's all about having a center or a point of rotation. And then we also need to have a magnitude, center of rotation and magnitude. The magnitude is telling us how many degrees something is being rotated around. And then it also tells us which direction. All right, we have to make sure we also know which direction to turn. If it's a positive degree, that means we're going counterclockwise. If it's a negative degree, that means we are going clockwise. So just remember that. Last but not least, here we go down here in the bottom. Translations is what we're getting into today. Translations, we need one of two things to be happening. If we're on a coordinate plane, it's usually telling us how are the x values changing, how are the y values changing. If we're in space without a coordinate plane, without that grid paper, then we need to know a vector, right? The vector shows us which direction and how far to slide something. And so that's what we're looking for in translations. That's what we really need to know. So translations. Okay, here's the, and I'll just write this up on top again. Translations, okay? Here is the notation, something that you need to make sure you understand and that you write down. Translations. Capital T, we have this vector, all right, something that shows us how to move or describes to us what to move. We've got the pre-image, which becomes the new image, right? And so the vector, this little vector spot, again, as I just mentioned, if it's in an open space, just like this spot down here, it's a segment, or, you know, we could also say it might be an array that connects two coordinating points. Right? It connects A to A prime, or maybe it connects D to D prime, something like that. It's telling us where and how to move the pre-image. If we are on a coordinate plane, if we are on a graph, it's going to tell us or describe to us the change in X and the change in Y coordinates, right? It's going to tell us which way and how much to move everything. So we really need to just understand which one we're working with. So here's an example, right? Here's a coordinate plane. Here's a graph called the coordinate plane. And we've got a translation, -3, 4, of the pre-image, which is becoming A prime, B prime, C prime, D, A prime, B prime, C prime, okay? Here's our clue right here, -3, 4. Well, what we have to remember is that it's always talking about x comma y, okay? X comma y. So this means we're taking our x coordinates and we are subtracting 3 from them, and we're taking our y coordinates and we're adding 4. Well, when we have that graphed, what that means, if I'm subtracting 3, that means I'm going left 3. So left 1, 2, 3, and up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that this new point was 3 left and 4 up, and it's now A prime. Okay, so the X, if it's negative, that means left. If it's positive, it's up. You kind of get the idea, right? And that's why I wrote it with X minus 3 or Y plus 4. So now if we do that with each of the points, with B, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's B prime. And then C is going to be 1, 2, 3 left, 1, 2, 3, and 4 up. So that is now our C prime, which means we truly have that triangle that I just outlined in blue. Okay. And we moved each point 3 left and 4 up. 3 left, 4 up. Okay, so there's what that notation is telling you and asking you to do. But what happens when you don't have a grid, when you don't have anything to count with? Well, then they give you a vector. Okay, they give you this ray or this segment that is describing to you where and how to move a point. And they're telling me that I have to move this pre-image by the ray D, D prime. So let's create that, right? Let's create that segment right here. D to D prime. Now, the difficult part in this program is that I can't copy and paste this. But that means each one of these points, like if I try to draw it, needs to move in this exact same angle and the same distance, right? So that would give us A prime right there. This distance has to be the same as this distance, right? They have to have moved the same distance. The angle at which they move, so this angle to this angle, if I had another line right here, those have to be the same because the angle at which they moved also had to be the same, right? So if I move B have to be the same angle. So B prime. Right? Same thing with C. I'd have to move C the same exact angle and the same distance. It's almost like we're creating a 3D image in a sense, right? Which is really kind of what ironically is happening. So, oops, maybe B prime was supposed to be back there. And, you can kind of see now that my lines are a little bit off with this program. But hopefully you get the idea that the vector, these lines that showed I moved the same distance as D to D prime. We moved them all in that same distance and in that same direction. That's the vector in space. I hope most of this made sense to you. If you have questions, please make sure that you reach out because this is really all we're doing with translations. It's just physically sliding an object so far, so many directions, and then we'll talk about what compositions look like. So today you're going to have a Google slide practice that I just want you to work on filling out as best as you can, notations, using words. What is it that you know that needs to be done? And if you have questions, make sure that you reach out. Until next time, stay safe.